Welcome, everybody, to edition number 4 of the Soccer Brain. So, today, what we're going to talk about is the use of constraints and how constraints change players' perception, which in turns changes visual search, changes invitations for action, and changes the players' actions themselves. And constraints are massively important for developing soccer IQ, soccer intelligence, tactical intelligence, and the relationship between the environment, the constraints, the player, how all this can also develop a unique technical skill set as well, not just a tactical intelligence skill set. So, most people think that complete freedom fosters creativity, where we know that complete freedom actually doesn't foster creativity. Complete freedom actually has players solving problems the same way over and over and over again because you have not changed perception. You have not changed invitations for action. The kind of the definition of a constraint is some things are possible, some solutions, some movement solutions, some tactical solutions are possible, while other solutions become not possible. Take street soccer for an example. You have street soccer, you have futsal, you have beach soccer, you have playing on really bumpy pitches in different parts of the world. All these things are actually constraints. Everything is a constraint when you look at it. So beach soccer is a constraint. So now you have to come up with different movement solutions playing beach soccer than you would on a regular grass field. Futsal, using the sole of your foot, it's just a completely different game with different solutions, which changes your perception, which changes your actions, both technically and tactically. These things are between the environment and the player. And the two things together bring about these unique skill sets without, and this is the key, without the use of a coach. You have to understand that you can use constraints in your current training sessions right now, but there's also that whole street soccer thing where you don't need a coach, and those constraints take care of development on their own. Constraints in practice can, in a formal practice setting, you can constrain by the field size, you can constrain by the shape of the field, you can constrain by the number of players, neutral players, plus players, you can constrain by rules and conditions, simple things, the touch limits. But the touch limits is very, very simple. You can constrain by say, hey, maybe the first three touches on transition are one touch and then it goes to free play. You can use boxes, you could use zones, you could use lines, you could have different ways of scoring, multiple different ways of scoring. All these types of constraints open up perception and action depending on what's possible and what's not possible. What I would stress to you is this: adaptable players, you could put them in all sorts of constrained environments and they will eventually figure out ways to be successful. And adaptable players, intelligent players, that is ultimately what you want to produce. Now, you can have game model specific constraints, and I'll show you a little diagram of exercise that I do that is game model specific. But at the end of all this, the the constraints have to change perception, which forces a change in action, which forces a higher IQ. You're going to see more adaptable, better players. Here's an example of a few donor sports. Now, donor sports are things that transfer to the real skill set, the real sport, but they're not actually. So you have arena football, you have box lacrosse, you have Wing Chun martial arts for American football, all these produce different skill sets that are unique that can be applied to the real sport, just like you could say futsal is a donor sport to American soccer. So it's just something to keep in mind. We're going to talk about in the future, but those are all constraints and they're called donor sports. Now we're just going to take a quick look at some constraints that I use in practice with my team. Constraint-based training session made for breaking a low block and also for the team who wins the ball for a quick counterattack into the 40 yards of space behind the team who just lost the ball. So the white team is pressed up trying to break the red team's low block. If the red team wins the ball, the white team cannot drop into their half of the field until the ball crosses halfway. This sets up a really nice situation for the red team to counter into that 40 yards of space. So let's look at how that works. Go, counter! Don't drop, white! Good, now drop red! This is an example of a non-game model constraint, but you can see the way the field is shaped there in pink, that it poses some constraints in terms of finding the available spaces. This exercise 5v5 plus 2, you have multiple ways to score, you have touch restrictions, so this requires adaptable, smart players to be successful. In this exercise, the goals are put in the corners of the field, so it actually throws off a lot of how to exploit space and time and also your dominant foot to shoot with. This next exercise here is in a small area, so it's exploiting space and time in a tiny area. Obviously, there's a numbers advantage for the team in black. They also have the 2 yellow players on their team. If the team of 4, the pressing 4, win the ball, they can score in either of the 2 nets. In this next exercise, you can see half the field is split into vertical lanes. You cannot play a ball straight forward in a vertical lane or straight backwards. It must go out of the lane. Here is a game model specific constraint setup. So you notice that each zone is a zone of intentions. So this is just one way that I teach our game model. The fast area, the box on top of the box is a one-touch zone only. You could also make that a flexible zone where players can do more than one touch if they can make the situation better. Maybe some opportunities for dribbling, but you could also make it a strict one-touch zone. You could see that each space out wide is labeled in the intentions that you would like to see the players do in your actual game model. And with these sort of constraints, you can make them flexible, you can make them very rigid. It all depends what you're going for. But that's an example of setting up the field in a game model specific way that already either requires the players to play in the way of the game model, so you're making almost decisions for them in that area, or you could set it up as flexible, so you're kind of giving them the intentions of what they can do.